Hey guys, it's Faye from Solar Flow, and I am back with an all-new energy read. And yes, this one is also in audio only, and this one is also being modified and repurposed from a blog. And here's why. First and foremost, it's still Mommy Day Camp, and that means I'm entertaining my little one and don't want to cut into our time together by spending time doing my makeup and then recording or maybe re-recording or editing. So the purpose in me getting this nifty little device that I can record the audio on was first and foremost with the intention of starting to create more content on an ongoing basis that I can do once my little is asleep. Now, conveniently enough, it also happened to have come prior to Mommy Day Camp, and I was like, let's see how I can make this work. Because the YouTube overlords demand content. And as I had discovered over spring break time when I took about 10 days off and I was not consistently posting content, oh boy, did the algorithm on my channel suffer. And when trying to make a channel grow, suffering is the last thing that we want to induce upon it. So we are making it work. But here's an interesting thing. This topic that we're going to talk about today, even though it's not a celebrity, and it may even not be somebody that you have heard of, the takeaway in this is quite remarkable. And I actually just finished reading through my blog post and I was like, damn, this is good. This is some good shit. And this needs a moment. And this needs a moment far bigger than the moment it's been having just living up on my website. So again, even though it's somebody that you may not have heard of because it's not a celebrity, there's something fabulous. There is such a good juicy takeaway in this, guys. So I'm going to say, if you like my other content, give this one a go because it's not going to disappoint. And if it has disappointed, please feel free to let me know down below in the comment that this was not my finest work. My offerings are without ego. You can tell me that you didn't like it and I'm perfectly okay with it because guess what? It's not like I painted a picture and I want to please the masses with it. It's not like I wrote a book and I want it to be a bestseller. It's like I sat down to receive information and whatever came in, came in. But the information came through me, but it is not of me. So there's no ego connected to it. So I'm perfectly okay with you not liking this particular audio or not liking this particular channeled reading. It's all good. I do strive to keep you guys entertained though, and I do strive to think about what is content that would be interesting to you guys. However, being the channeler myself, I also do allow myself to pick topics that I think are of interest to me. And this young woman is definitely of interest to me. Now, I'm also going to say, I know a lot about her on a three-dimensional level because the way this came to me and how I know so much about it is that I had YouTube on. And those of you that have been with me for a while probably at this point know I don't really watch TV. YouTube is my entertainment, which is why I enjoy being on YouTube because I know there are so many fantastic content creators on YouTube and there is something for everybody. And it's where I've met all of you guys and connected with all of you guys as well. So I had actually been folding my laundry and putting it away, and the video I had been watching ended. And there's some channel on YouTube where they talk about, it's a lawyer who goes over legal cases and he's dissecting it and analyzing it from a lawyer's perspective. So it started to play, and I was like, well, this is actually interesting. So I let it continue to play, and I learned a lot about the case. And then once I had learned a lot about it, I was like, well, this actually sounds really interesting. So I wanted to channel the information. And then once I had done that, I had Googled it and I had looked into a little bit more as well. So it's going to be a little bit different because there's a lot of three-dimensional information in it, but there's still channeled information into this woman's energy. And there is the societal takeaway at the end, which is fascinating. So it's surprising, actually. So even though this was a very, very long intro, it's to set up a case that is very interesting, very different, and I think you're going to enjoy it. So with that in mind, let's dive in. So today's energy read is on a woman by the name of Kouri Richens. Now, Kouri Richens is a 33-year-old mother of 3 children, aged 9, 7, and 5 years old. Now, why are we looking into Kouri's energy at all? Why are we talking about Kouri's energy at all? And here's why. Last year, in March of 2022, she was, or she might have actually have been not arrested then, but back in March of 2022, her husband of 9 years, a man named Eric, was found deceased. Now, these things happen. This within itself is unfortunately not completely remarkable, right? What is remarkable about this is that in under a year since the passing of her husband, Kouri had written a book about mourning and grieving. And then she was arrested for taking him off the earth plane. Wow. Wild, right? Just wait. Buckle up, buttercups. This actually does get truly and genuinely wild. Because the strangest thing about Kouri Richens is that when we peel back the veil on Kouri, we will actually come to discover that this case pertains to and connects to the 70% of the population that has been speculated to not have consciousness. Is this true? Let's find out. All right, so before we get into the channeled information, let's dissect some of the 3D facts in the case. So as I had mentioned, Kouri and her husband Eric were married for 9 years and have 3 young sons, 9, 7, and 5. Now, what was notable about March 4th, 2022 is that this was the same night that the Richens had closed on a $2 million home, and this same home is the very same one that the couple was reportedly fighting over. Why were they fighting over it? Because even though Kouri had claimed she wanted to purchase this home as an investment property to then flip it, I suspect that the fights had actually revolved around Eric's belief that although the property was being purposed for the purpose of flipping it, that once owned, Kouri would insist on keeping it and moving into it. So this was kind of a sneaky way of her getting her hands on a property that ordinarily they would not have. They probably had a very nice but modest home for a small-sized family, or maybe it's a large-sized family depending on how you view it, but it wasn't as big and gangster as this home was. Now, I'm going to use the term house pertaining to this house rather loosely because it's actually more akin to a palace. And why? Because it sits on 9 acres of land, boasts 20,000 square feet, has 2 kitchens, a butler's pantry, a regular and a therapy pool. So 2 pools, 2 kitchens, 2 pools, a regular pool and a therapy pool, whatever that is. It has 8 bedrooms, 12 bathrooms, a rock climbing wall, and did I mention it has 2 kitchens? 2, because one is just simply not enough. Plus, it has unparalleled views of the Utah mountains and a 3,000 square foot guest house. This was not a fucking house. This was a fucking palace. Now, for context, I have never been in a home that's 20,000 square feet. However, I was once in a condo that was 3,000 square feet. And this condo was massive. It had separate wings. You could be on one side of the wing and you could holler to a person on the other side of the wing and they actually wouldn't even hear you. You would have to go to the midpoint and then holler in order for them to hear you. That was a 3,000 square foot condo. So imagine, if you will, the massive overabundance of space that this house, quote unquote, actually had. It was ridiculous. But here's the thing. Dissecting and discussing the ridiculousness of the size of this home very much pertains to Kouri Richens and is one of the first pieces in coming to understand her, which is that she was someone, or is someone, that is obsessed with status. Because a house was not enough for her. She needed to have a gangster house. Okay. Now, what else do we know about Kouri in the 3-dimensional realm? That it has been reported that she took out multiple life insurance policies in Eric's name, totaling $2 million. And she did this by forging his signature and taking it out and pretending as if she was him taking it out on himself. Now, she also changed herself to be the beneficiary in his primary policy and then therefore stood to collect millions of dollars more from his primary life insurance policy, as well as millions from his business per the terms of their prenuptial agreement should they legally be married at the time of his death. So it behooved her to therefore stay married to him at the point that he was going to be deceased because of the additional millions she would collect because of the terms of their prenup. And here we have 3D motive. Now, let's explore what else we know. Thank you to our good friends at Google. So first and foremost, prior to Eric's death, he had confided in friends that he believed Kouri was having an affair. And in addition to that, on 2 separate occasions, he had shared with his family that he believed Kouri was poisoning him because after she had fixed him something to eat, he had become violently ill. Now, this of course does not prove anything, but it does show that Eric was onto her and perhaps Kouri herself was not as clever as she thought herself to be. Now, on the night in question, March in 2022, Kouri had called the police when she had found Eric unresponsive, approximately 3 a.m. Now, what had happened that night? She had reported to the police that she had made Eric a Moscow Mule, which is an alcoholic beverage, and she had made it for him in celebration of them closing on this $2 million home, even though they were fighting on it. Thereafter, she had put her kids to bed and claims that she had fallen asleep in bed with one of her sons, only to waken at 3 a.m. and discover that Eric was deceased. However, Kouri's cell phone records prove otherwise, as they show that she had been making text messages and receiving text messages and deleting text messages during this time that she claims to have been asleep. Plus, her phone indicates that she had been walking around the house. Our cell phones keep no secrets. That's the first thing we know from this. If you're going to commit a crime, I'm not encouraging anybody to commit a crime, but if someone's going to commit a crime, they got to be a little bit smarter about it, because phones keep no secrets. Now, what has also come out thereafter since me writing this blog post, because I've actually kept up with it because I'm curious about this case, is that she had actually been Googling what is the lethal dose for fentanyl poisoning. Because what was found to be the cause of Eric's death was fentanyl poisoning. Doesn't really look good for Kouri. Now, in addition to this, Kouri had also purchased drugs for a so-called quote-unquote investor on 3 separate occasions. And these occasions also happened to have coincided with the 2 previous times that Eric had become ill, and this last time that he had ultimately died due to fentanyl poisoning. Tisk, tisk, Kouri. Someone has been very, very naughty and very sloppy. Now, supposedly, because of the shock of Eric's untimely passing, Kouri and her 3 young children had scoured Amazon searching for books on grief, but were unable to find anything suitable, so they had decided to write one. We're going to come back to this. But first, we're going to shift gears out of the 3-dimensional information, and we're going to get to the goods. What are the goods? The goods is the channeled stuff that you guys are here for. Because if you're like me, and if you're here, I know you enjoy this stuff, we are peeling back the 3-dimensional veil, and we are going to explore what is going on an energetic, soul, or spiritual level. And we're going to get to the energetic goods right now. So, first and foremost, I'm going to share with you that when I had connected to Kouri's energy, she was not happy to see me and reacted to me much the way a celebrity would react to a paparazzo that was trying to take their picture when they were just not in the mood. So energetically, she had seen me, she had come up to me, she took her hand and she smashed it at my face as if I were the paparazzo that was holding up a camera and I was trying to take a picture of her. So she did not like having me come around and seeing her when she perceives herself to not be in control. And why does she perceive herself to not be in control? Because she is currently incarcerated and being held without bail. And why is she being held without bail? Because in a pretrial hearing, which is basically where the prosecution will have a mini hearing, so to say, and they will share with a judge the evidence that they have, for a judge to then decide if they have ample evidence to secure a prosecution, or do they even have ample evidence to show that they have the right person in custody. Now, because of the fact that there was an overabundance of evidence, much more than I've even laid out here, but there has been an overabundance of evidence, connecting Kouri to the untimely passing of her husband, Eric, the judge had deemed her to be not a flight risk. A flight risk is where like this person maybe has a lot of money overseas and they have family overseas and they have a passport, and the judge is thinking, what's to stop this person from getting on an airplane and disappearing? In the case of Kouri, it was more kind of, there's a lot of evidence on this woman, and desperate times call for desperate measures. So could she, could she potentially act out in rage because she feels like she already has nothing to lose? And could she potentially attempt to harm other people because of it? Yes, absolutely. So therefore, she was held without the possibility of bail leading up to her eventual hearing. So she is in custody, and therefore she feels like she is out of control. Now, as you also know, if I connect to somebody's energy and they don't want me there, and they express the fact that they do not want their energy to be read, I would respect that and I would leave. But here's the thing that had happened with Kouri. After she had energetically smashed the camera into my face, she kind of like assessed me, and she assessed the situation and was trying to evaluate how I could be useful to her. And therefore, she did not rescind the ability for me to connect to and to read her energy. It wasn't like she said to me, get the fuck out of here. And then I would have. She assessed it and realized perhaps I would have some value and some use to her. But it had to be on her terms. So first and foremost, she let it be known that she was choosing to allow me to access her energy, but to remember, it was her choice. So I should be grateful that she was allowing it. And the face smashing? That was just her asserting her control over me, akin to the way in which a cat rubs its body and whiskers on its quote-unquote human to let other cats know this human is taken. But Kouri is no cat. She's not fluffy, she's not furry, she's not cute either. She is a grown-ass woman who wanted to let me know who's in charge. Her. So, once she had established that, and she agreed to let me read her energy, and remember to be grateful for it, she shared with me that she is seething on the inside because she feels out of control being locked up. And why does she feel out of control? These are my words, not hers. Because she's a control freak. And being locked up at the moment cannot control anyone or anything. And her need for control was actually the impetus in her killing Eric, because she felt she could no longer control him. So whereas before she at least felt she could gain back some semblance of control through sex, that ended after she started poisoning Eric, and he became suspicious of her. So all of her accrued goodwill had completely dried up after he found out that she had switched the life insurance policy out of his sister's name and into her own, thus making her the sole beneficiary. And while Eric had the good sense to switch his sister back to being the beneficiary, this was becoming a theme in their marriage. Eric would try to lay down some sort of a law. Kouri wouldn't listen. Kouri would spend money. Eric would ask her to stop. Kouri would spend anyway. Eric would ask her to stop. On and on it went. So while Kouri perceived that she had lost control of Eric, he had actually lost control of her. Now, another thing to understand about Kouri is that she's not particularly deep nor introspective. She is not a woman who reflects on why this might be the case, as she is a perfect example of somebody that lives completely veiled. In addition to that, she lives in an alternate reality, and one of her making, and more to her liking than the actual reality. In her altered reality, she could treat Eric and his money as her own personal ATM, sucking him dry and racking up hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt without accountability. Then she could kill him for it without reproach and without any awareness that in the actual reality, her children would grow up without a father at the hands of their mother and the emotional distress that this would cause them. Oh, never mind about that. She'll just write a book about it. No need to deal with actual emotions because she doesn't have any. Now, if you're wondering where this sense of entitlement and lack of emotional empathy comes from, this was being shown to me as being rooted in, surprise, surprise, her childhood. Now, what was shown to me is that Kouri grew up with an overly permissive father who never said no to her and treated her like she was a little princess. And I was specifically shown one such example where Kouri's father had gone to buy her in the Disney store one of the princess costumes. And he had purchased for her the Snow White princess costume, but Kouri had wanted the Sleeping Beauty one. And when her father had come home with the wrong princess costume, Kouri became enraged at him for buying her the wrong one. She wanted the Sleeping Beauty one. How dare he buy her the wrong one? And dutifully, he went back to the Disney store and got her the costume she actually had wanted all along, and the bad behavior and sense of entitlement was thus reinforced. Now, why did Kouri want a princess costume in the first place is because Kouri was so taken in by princesses and relished watching the Disney princess movies. Now, we're not talking about the more current Disney princess movies, which are a bit more empowering, right? So the Disney princess movies today, we have characters like Moana, who is paving her own way and saving her tribe. She's saving her people. These are the Disney princess movies from days of yore, how they are now referred to as the so-called classics. So these are the Sleeping Beauties, these are the Snow Whites, these are the... I can't think of any other ones right now. But these kinds. So she was very, very taken in by them, and she would watch these Disney movies like they held the keys to all of life's secrets and mysteries. Her personal favorite was The Little Mermaid, and she absorbed all of the programming dutifully. And what is some of the programming? There's a very notable scene in The Little Mermaid where Ursula, I don't know what Ursula is supposed to be. I think she's some sort of witch/octopus type thing. And she makes potions. And in the scene that Ariel goes to her, because Ariel has apparently fallen in love with seeing a prince on land one time. And she wants to have legs so she can go to Prince Eric's world and she can fall in love with him and have him fall in love with her. The only problem is she's a mermaid. So she goes to Ursula to get a potion that will temporarily turn her into a human. And what is Ursula telling her when Ariel finds out that there's going to be a price, but it's not monetary? The price is she's going to have to give up her voice in exchange for the potion. And she's like, what am I going to do without my voice? So Ursula is singing to her, and she's telling her, well, men don't like a woman that talks a lot. They find them to be a bore. And don't forget the importance of body language, i.e., sex. And all a man really wants is looks and a pretty face. So Kouri was absorbing all of this and coming to this conclusion when she was a little girl that if she followed this script, a handsome prince would save her too. And as she got older, she became very well acquainted with the feminine ways in which a woman could manipulate a man, and thought that as long as she had put out, i.e., sex, and had given Eric some kids, because it's what he wanted, he'd give her everything she wanted. That was the script anyway, of how things worked out in Disney movies. But it doesn't work like that in real life. And even though it had worked with her father, and she had been able to snag her own Prince Eric, which ironically enough has the same name as the prince in The Little Mermaid, the prince did not in fact give her everything she wanted. Because this man, this human named Eric, that was not one-dimensional like in a Disney movie. This man named Eric was rooted in actual reality, and he understood that the money they earned was finite, and Kouri was burning through it faster than they could replenish it. Kouri was in fact the one that was out of control. And her resentment towards Eric grew as this was not part of the script. And the more he said no to her, the more the resentment built. So she resorted to doing what she wanted to anyway and racked up debt in the hundreds of thousands. But even then, she wouldn't stop. She was, if you will, like Cookie Monster, but it wasn't cookies she wanted to consume. It was the world. And here, Kouri was shown to me as the iPhone or tablet game called Whole.io. I only know about this game because I have a little one. Otherwise, I don't know a lot of adults that are playing these kind of games on devices. If you're one of them, more power to you. It's just that my reference of this game is limited to my scope and understanding, which is not actually through my own experiences. But it was shown to me. So what is the premise of this game called Whole.io? The objective in it is to have your black hole eat more than the other competing contestants, lest their black hole consume more than you, or even consume you and thus knock you out of the game. And what does this black hole eat? Houses, trees, mailboxes, cars, buildings, dinosaurs, other players. If it exists, it's consumed. Now, oddly enough, Kouri didn't love the stuff she was actually consuming. And by consuming, I don't mean she was like literally consuming it. She wasn't eating it. The consumption was the purchasing of these things. Now, she wasn't even consciously consuming. What she actually was doing was trying to fill up the black hole inside of her. That was where her consciousness should have been. So here it was shown to me that she was, and I talk about, this is the example I give all the time, so I hope you're not tired of it. And if you are, I can't do anything about it. But she was the person carrying around a water bottle, and the water bottle happens to have a hole in it. But instead of this person stopping and inspecting the bottle to see if there was something faulty with it, they just keep filling it up only to have their water leak back out. And then they're filling it up again only to have it leak back out. And then every time they reach for the water bottle, they're just complaining, like, I don't know what's wrong with my water bottle. Like, every time I'm reaching for my bottle because I'm thirsty and I want to drink something, there's just never enough water in there. But it's because they're not actually stopping to inspect their bottle to see if there's something wrong with it. So from Kouri's point of view, without the consumption and the physical evidence left behind by it, it was like she herself would cease to exist. And it was also shown to me that she was incredibly influenced by a HGTV show called House Hunters. And this is a show where couples are shown 3 different properties, and at the end of a 30-minute episode, they close on one of those properties, they move in, and they decorate it. But again, her being influenced by this TV show was without any level of introspection if what she was perceiving was real, and if it even worked for her. So she essentially wanted to fast track the process and live life in fast forward. She wanted the gangster status symbol house to feed her obsession with image, but without the funds to support it. And the only thing that was holding her back was Eric. And thus, he was literally worth more to her dead than alive. And it was here that I asked Kouri if she killed Eric for the money, and she practically shouted at me, quote, "Of course it was about the money, you stupid bitch," end quote. And with that one line alone, I understood how this supposedly grieving widow that was too distraught by the sudden and untimely passing of her husband that she could not participate in any of the funeral arrangements, was able to organize a party to celebrate the closing on the house the day after Eric died. And how this supposedly grieving widow got into a physical altercation with her sister-in-law over the life insurance policy that she had been cut out of just days after her husband's death. And how did she even come to discover this? She had a safe cutter trying to break into the safe, I believe, in the family's garage. And her sister-in-law, that was listed as the beneficiary on the life insurance policy, showed up and said, "You can't be here." And she said, "What do you mean? This is my house." And the sister-in-law said, "I'm the sole beneficiary on the life insurance policy, and this house was left to me. This is no longer your house, and you cannot be here. You are trespassing, and you are destroying personal property by having a safe cutter here, trying to break in to Eric's safe." And this was when Kouri had discovered that Eric had discovered she had put her name on the life insurance policy and had switched it back. And she had become so enraged because those millions she thought she was going to collect had slipped through her fingers. And she had gotten into a physical altercation with her sister-in-law at the discovery of this. It's interesting. I tend to avoid the 3D facts of cases, but when I actually know them, I can actually report well on them. And it was also with this that I came to understand how she wrote a book about mourning and grieving so soon after his death. Now, as we have concluded, Kouri is somebody that is driven by money with a lack of emotional empathy. So whereas others might be legitimately too lost in their own actual grief to care about reading a book on grieving, let alone research books and then decide that they're going to write one, or with any level of introspection to wonder, is it perhaps too soon because he's been gone less than a year? Kouri, on the other hand, had no problem capitalizing on his death. And while she didn't decide to take him off the earth plane to write a book, once he was already gone, why let this great opportunity go to waste? And additionally, since she had no genuine and true feelings for Eric, she wasn't actually mourning. And without the book, there would be no physical 3D evidence to support her supposed grief. So the book then, therefore, would create the illusion of it because it was a representation in the material world, and it was not some nebulous thing called emotions that she herself didn't understand because she herself didn't have them. So without something tangible in the world, i.e. this book, it was like her grief didn't exist. And therefore, without the representation of something identifying her supposed grief, it was then like she herself didn't exist either. So Kouri didn't grieve Eric. And she didn't grieve him because she didn't love him. And she doesn't actually love anyone. And she didn't actually even love the things she consumed. She only loved the validation of her existence that they provided to her. And it was at this point when I was doing the channeling that a song flittered through my mind like a butterfly flying by. And this song sums Kouri up rather nicely. It's called The Fear by Lily Allen. And I haven't written down all of the lyrics. I've only taken a sampling of them. And it goes like this. I want to be rich and I want lots of money. I don't care about clever. I don't care about funny. I want loads of clothes and fuckloads of diamonds. I heard people died while trying to find them. And I'll take my clothes off and it will be shameless, 'cause everyone knows that's how you get famous. I don't know what's right and what's real anymore, and I don't know how I'm meant to feel anymore. And when do you think it will all become clear? 'Cause I'm being taken over by the fear. Life's about film stars and less about mothers. It's all about fast cars and cussing each other. But it doesn't matter 'cause I am packing plastic, i.e. credit cards. And that's what makes my life so fucking fantastic. And I am a weapon of massive consumption. And it's not my fault. It's how I'm programmed to function. Now, that's just a sampling of some of the lyrics. But here's the crazy thing. This sampling of lyrics isn't just a Kouri thing. It's a 70% of the population thing. Because yes, 70% of the population is void of consciousness. Let's explore. Now, this 70% was first and foremost shown to me as not being born this way, but being programmed. And just like the cabal has replaced God with money, we too have been stripped of our divine consciousness, and it's been replaced with consumerism. And to outsource our sense of personal identity by comparing ourselves to the collective. Now I'm going to break this down and I'm going to explain this. Now in the past, I have done a video on the so-called cabal and religion, and I will link it down below. If you have not seen it yet, I highly recommend going back and watching it because there are so many interesting things that had come out of that reading. I'm going to take just a small sampling of it and I'm going to share it here, which is that the origination of this so-called cabal, and if you don't know what that is, comment down below and I will share some of my other previous videos that will illuminate this concept a little bit more in depth. But this so-called cabal originated shortly after the Jews had left Egypt and were taken into the desert. And there was some confusion at the time that Moses had gone up to the mountaintop to commune with God. And therefore, the confusion was, when does the 40 days start? Is it the day he went up or the following day? So because he didn't come back at the 40th day when some of the people had thought he was going to come back, they felt like they had been abandoned by God. And even though there had been miracles that had been performed, they now felt like, oh shit, we've been taken out of Egypt. We can't go back. We are now stuck in the desert. We are now stuck up the creek, up Schitt's Creek, and we don't have a paddle. So they then, therefore, in a trauma response, had decided to create a God that was rooted in the 3D, and it wasn't some nebulous thing that only Moses could go onto a mountaintop and could commune with. Because we can't see God, we need proof of God. So they had decided to create God, and they had created, at that time, the golden calf. So that was the origin point of the cabal's obsession with things. Because things, anything that you can touch, taste, smell, you can see, you can gaze upon, you can hold it, any representation was replacing a nebulous idea such as God. So again, because the cabal has replaced God with money, and because we're kind of like, if you will, living in their world, we have therefore been stripped of our divine consciousness, and it has been replaced with consumerism. We've been trained by the cabal to replace God with finite resources, and then to outsource our sense of personal identity by comparing ourselves to the collective. And why would they do this? Because it's kind of like that person who says, if I can't have that toy, no one can have that toy. So because they can't have a real, genuine, and true relationship with God, we cannot have one either. And as we are on this precipice of starting to energetically ascend, it's going to be a time when we are going to merge our individual and independent consciousness with the so-called collective consciousness, but it will be in a divinely inspired way. It's not going to be where we're going to lose our own sense of self, but rather look at it like when it's going to be a time where our own personal veils will dissolve, and we will know that we are one with everybody else and everything. So it's the integration of all parts into a whole, and with this understanding that you are not a drop in the ocean, you are the entire ocean in a drop. And that's why that is a quote that lives on the homepage of my website, because that's where we're going. It's not where we're losing ourselves, but where we're gaining connection to the whole. But in a healthy way, not where we're competing with other people, but where we are working with other people. And what does this so-called drop in the ocean contain? Right? You are not a drop in the ocean, you are the entire ocean in a drop. So what does that drop contain? Everything. It's the trees, the buildings, the mailboxes. It's everything the players in Whole.io are trying to consume. But whereas in that game, they're doing it to fill a void, when we merge with everyone else, it's not because we're trying to fill a void, but it's because there isn't even any void. And it is the full expansion of the individual self with the collective. The people, the plants, the pets, everything. And with it comes a recognition that we are all connected. And we would then therefore never want to hurt another, because by doing so, that would be the equivalent of hurting ourselves. It's when you look at another person, but you don't see the 3D manifestation of the person, you see the soul. And it's with the recognition that your soul is connected to their soul, so you would never want to hurt that person, because hurting their soul is like hurting your soul. So imagine how formidable we collectively would all be if we all knew this. But we don't. But you know who does? The cabal knows. And what better way then to keep us all in a low energetic and vibratory state than through the denial of the divine and through the denial of our own divinity. Because once we are veiled to that, the cabal can create race and class, and then race and class wars to divide us. And once we're veiled to that, they can corrupt our sense of identity by making it all about 3D things that are completely devoid of divinity. And once we're veiled to that, they can program us to judge ourselves and our worth against others by creating a class of have and have-nots. And it's all done to stop our ascension. Because the cabal is a low vibratory entity. And if we are all vibrating and we are all ascending at a higher rate, then they are no longer an energetic match for us and they have to disappear. And they have been around for thousands of years. And they've been in control for thousands of years. They don't want to disappear. So you can at this point almost imagine our overlords standing above us, pointing at a shopping mall and commanding us to consume peasants. Not to consume the peasants. They refer to us as peasants, and they are demanding that we, the peasants, consume. And if we didn't, we'd open up a magazine selling impossible beauty standards of these skinny, spray-tanned women with these hair extensions and airbrush skin. And we'd then question, why we don't look that way while we pinch at the skin at our hips and scowl in the mirror at the pores on our face. Surely our lives would be better if we looked like that. And if that didn't get us to question our self-worth, we'd turn on the TV and see the Kardashians and the Real Housewives and their lavish lives. And then we'd look around at our modest homes, paid for with our modest means, and wonder if we were doing something wrong because we don't live like that. Surely our lives would be better if we lived like that. And if that didn't do it, we'd turn on the radio and hear songs about how we are incomplete without love. But not just any love, not just an ordinary love. The kind of unrealistic fairy tale romance, the unhealthy, codependent kind of love. And then we'd look at our partner, who's as comfortable as your favorite pair of shoes, but without the excitement. Surely our lives would be better if we had love like that. And if that didn't do it, ... On and on it goes. Because it doesn't actually matter what comes next, because it's all a form of programming designed to turn us into empty, sentient slaves of consumption. And Kouri was just one of those slaves. And what better way to slow down our ascension than through that consumption? Because surely our lives would be better with fill in the blank. Because look how great the lives are for those people living with it. So from the Lily Allen song, quote, "I want to be rich and I want lots of money. I don't care about clever. I don't care about funny." And that's what makes Lily Allen's song so divinely inspired for our times. Because, quote, "I am a weapon of massive consumption, and it's not my fault. It's how I'm programmed to function." End quote. So this was my energy reading on Kouri Richens and the so-called 70% of the population living without consciousness. And I hope that you have enjoyed this reading and found it to be thought-provoking or insightful. And again, I encourage you to please take what resonates, leave the rest behind, and then, as always, stay in the high vibration. Thank you, guys.